I've talked to a lot of folks who swear they're saving money by piecing together a budget gaming rig from cheap components, only to find the whole system stalls the moment they launch a newer title or try to stream a few friends. The disappointment sets in fast, and the regret is real. You've spent hours and dollars only to end up with a computer that can't keep up. So the question I keep hearing is, does going for a pre-built, higher-end machine actually make sense, or am I just paying a premium for a brand name? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I first saw the STGAubron gaming PC, the headline specs an RTX 3050, a 12th Gen i7, 32GB of RAM, and a 1TB SSD looked like a sweet spot for the 1080p TO 1440p gamer who also wants a solid workstation for everyday tasks. The first thing I did was dig into the forums, skim a handful of Reddit threads about building a similar spec, and look at the occasional YouTube teardown. What surfaced was a common pain point. Many users with a comparable budget end up compromising on storage speed or Wi-Fi performance, which ends up feeling like a bottleneck during large game patches or when you're trying to upload clips to Twitch. The STGAubron promises Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.0 right out of the box, so I was curious if those hidden upgrades would actually translate into smoother day-to-day use. Let's start with the real-world setup. The box arrives as a fairly standard mid-tower. Inside, the RTX 3050 sits on a modest but functional aftermarket cooler. Nothing flashy, but it does keep the GPU temperatures under 70°C during extended play sessions. The 6 RGB fans are arranged around the chassis in a way that looks cool without being obnoxious. They're mostly there for aesthetics, but they do move a decent amount of air. I hooked up a 144Hz monitor, plugged in a wired Ethernet cable, and started a few title runs, Valorant, Elden Ring, and Minecraft with shaders. In the low-end shooter, the frame rates were consistently in the 150,190 frames per second range, well above the monitor's refresh, which means the GPU isn't the limiting factor. For Elden Ring, which is notoriously demanding, I was hitting 5,565 frames per second at 1080p with high settings. That's respectable for an RTX 3050, and you can push it into 1440p if you dial a few settings down. Even with Minecraft mod packs, loading times were practically instantaneous thanks to that 1TB SSD. No one wants to stare at a loading screen for more than a few seconds, especially when you're trying to keep the momentum in a multiplayer lobby. Now, the daily usability side. The 32GB of DDR4 RAM is a luxury you rarely see in pre-builts under $1,400, and it shows up when you start multitasking. I opened Chrome with a dozen tabs, ran a Discord voice call, and kept the game running in the background. The system didn't hiccup, there was no RAM thrashing, and the latency stayed low. For anyone who streams, edits footage, or runs design software between gaming sessions, that memory headroom can be a genuine time saver. The Wi-Fi 6 module is another area where the STGAubron tries to differentiate itself. In my apartment, the wireless connection maintained a stable 240 megabits per second throughput, and I didn't experience the occasional dropouts that cheap adapters sometimes have. This is worth noting if your gaming room isn't wired directly to the router. Wi-Fi 6 really does make a difference when you're downloading large updates or uploading streaming clips. But there are trade-offs you should be aware of before you click Add to Cart. The RTX 3050, while solid for 1080p, still struggles with the newest AAA titles at ultra settings. If you're aiming for 1440p gaming with max texture quality, you'll need to lower a few graphics options, shadows and ray tracing, for example. The cooling solution is functional but not designed for overclocking. Push the GPU beyond its stock boost and you'll notice the fans ramp up noticeably louder. That's fine for occasional bursts, but if you plan to run the card at high loads for hours on end, you might want to consider an aftermarket cooler later on. Also, the case is a plain steel chassis, which means there's no tempered glass side panel to showcase the RGB lighting. If you're a show-off builder who likes to flaunt the internals, that could be a letdown. Who should buy this machine? If you're a gamer who plays modern titles at 1080p, wants a hassle-free setup meaning no BIOS tweaking, no driver mismatches, and also needs a capable workstation for tasks like video editing, photo retouching, or running multiple VMs, the STGAubron hits a sweet spot. The 1TB NVMe SSD gives you ample space for a handful of games and your creative files, and the 32GB RAM means you won't be swapping to disk as often as you might with a 16GB system. Parents looking for a family PC that can handle both school assignments and occasional esports sessions will find the value proposition appealing, especially with Windows 11 Home already installed. On the other hand, if you're a competitive esports player who needs the absolute highest